Welcome back to Americana on Tour. I'm Dan Barth, and this week we go to the general store at Living History Farms and see what our friends Art and Ermedine have for us, and then we'll visit the town doctor at Walnut Hill, Iowa, and see what practicing medicine was like a century ago. Art, Robbie wants a new toy today. Do you have anything in the store?
I think Robbie's just about the right size for a new Barlow knife myself.
I believe so. Ermedine, I'm looking for some perfume for my wife. Have you got anything in the store that's new?
We got some new flower scent and fragrance.
I think she'd like that. You want to go take a look at it?
Get it?
Let's go find it.
Okay, I'll tell you a little bit about women, and you know, we women have always been fickle. We've always tried to stay up with the fashions. And the perfume that we had in 1875, the only perfume was made out of flower scents. We either had violet perfume or we had rose perfume. It smelled like, made out of rose petals. Men used toilet water, and I guess, you know, in George Washington's personal effects, they found some toilet water, and that was kind of risque for him, because men in America didn't start wearing it as quick as they did over in Europe. Cosmetics, women in America, you know, when you go back to Cleopatra, she wore red clay for rouge, and she had berries that she put some coloring on with. But in America, we didn't wear makeup until the movie stars became popular. And one of the reasons we didn't do it was because the prostitutes and the saloon girls wore makeup, and we didn't want to be associated with them, and so we didn't wear makeup. One thing we did wear was powder. And women always wore powder. That's why the old bonnet was so popular, you know, because women wanted to keep their face so that it wouldn't look like it was suntan, because if it was suntan, that meant they weren't a lady. If a lady had money, why, she could hire somebody to go out and do her gardening, and she would carry a parasol when she walked outside and wouldn't let the sun get on her face. But a lady who worked in the garden or out in the field, she would get suntan. So that brought the bonnet about. Well, it also brought about their wearing powder. And if they didn't have the money to wear powder, a lot of times a woman would put cornstarch on her face. Anything that would go on her face that would make her look like she didn't have a suntan. And so that was the only thing that they wore back there then in the way of cosmetics. And the only perfume, as I said, was the flower perfume. Another thing we women did, however, though, when you think about us being as delicate as a lot of them claim to be, we dipped snuff in this time period. And it was proper for a lady to use snuff. She couldn't use tobacco, she couldn't chew it, she couldn't smoke it and be a lady, but I'm sure a lot of them did use it and did sneak away and do it. But to be a lady, you could dip snuff. And of course, snuff is just finely ground tobacco. That's what it is. And if you were going to be crude about it, this was nature's snuff box right here. You put a little snuff there, and you sniff it up your nose and then go achoo, because it opened up the sinuses in the head and help you breathe better. And that's what they claim to start using it for. But like all tobacco, you eventually got a tobacco habit out of it, and you end up being a snuff user. Now this is a little snuff bottle that women would carry around, pretty fancy. Have a little spoon or a little stick that you could dip in here sometimes, and they called it dipping snuff. And what you would do then is take a stick and dip it in moisture, dip it in here, and then put it underneath your lip, and that's what they call dipping snuff. And we women did that. We wouldn't do the other if we were a lady, but we did dip snuff.
Art, it looked like you were shooting a cane. What are you up to?
Well, I was shooting my walking cane gun at a dead blame rabbit. That rabbit's ate up my garden. Now he's working on my trees, but I missed him again. I don't know when I'll ever get that rabbit.
Oh, that rabbit is not going to hurt anything. He surely won't hurt anything now. What is that thing?
Well, this is a walking cane. And by golly, you can take a little walk out through the timber, and like you see that fool rabbit out there, you just stop, take the end of your walking stick off. Better do that or you're going to be a dead man. Cock it like that, aim out there and shoot him, see? Except I just didn't get him.
How old a gun is that?
Oh, these, actually your walking cane guns goes back to even to the flintlock days. and were still being made in America probably right up in the early 1900s. They've been around a long time.
So the walking cane gun was actually a utility item.
You betcha.
For older people?
Give an old duffer like me a chance to take a walk and have a little fun, see? Might come in with a rabbit, might come in with a squirrel. Then there were a lot of defense canes made. Now this one definitely isn't defense, because you see you've got to take this off. Like a piece of down. If it looked like trouble, you was ready to go. This one you'd have to wait and say, well, it just isn't a fast gun. This was actually 24 gauge. It's a gauge that's been obsolete for years, see? Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's got a lot of weight to it.
That's quite a gun, Art. That is quite a gun. Never saw one before in my life.
Oh, I just remembered, Art. You're supposed to take a bolt of material down to Doc Caldwell for bandages.
All righty. Well, you'll be happy to see that.
Hang on down.
Will do.
Okay.
Okay, Dan.
As Art and I walked down the street to Doc Caldwell's building, I learned he could have been the town doctor many years in Walnut Hill and was an important citizen in towns like this. The town doctor was equally at home treating animals and humans, and with a scant supply of real medicines and only a few bare necessities and medical and surgical instruments, he faced life and death situations. These dedicated practitioners fought epidemics, illness, serious accidents, disease, and nutritional deficiencies with natural instinct, talent, and fortitude. Join us now as we visit Doc Caldwell and get a closer look at his office.
Hi, Doc. There's that white cloth you ordered. Dan, meet Doc Caldwell, our neighborhood doctor.
Pleased to meet you, Doc.
Nice to meet you, Dan.
Nice to meet you. You have quite an establishment here. Can you tell us what was practicing medicine like back in your day?
Well, it was certainly a lot different than it is nowadays. We didn't have much to work with back then, but really they were pretty well equipped for their day. As a matter of fact, you see some of the herbs drying here that used a lot of herbs in the treatment then, which we don't use much anymore. Here's the way some of the medicine was prepared and kept and handed out to the patients as it was needed. Some of it was bought commercially and was shipped in. Here is the saddlebag pack, medicine in that carried on the horse when you go out to horseback, when you went out to make house calls and such. Of course, most of them were house calls back then. Here's a bandage roller, which we use to make bandages out of the cloth that I brought over.
Is that an early model stethoscope right there?
Oh, excuse me. Yes, this is one of the earlier stethoscopes. Of course, they didn't have the tubes and stuff. You just put it up to the person's chest or lungs and against your ear and listened, and it worked quite well.
It's amazing. They were on the right track.
We came quite a ways, but they did very well with what they had to do.
Yes, and this was a pretty well-equipped office.
Very well equipped for the day.
You know, this skeleton over here, what would have been the purpose of that skeleton?
Well, mostly to scare children, probably, but really, it was used to explain things to people. If they broke an arm, many of the common fractures, you could go over to the skeleton and say, well, you broke this bone and this bone, or about right in here, and this is what we're going to do to heal that. Or if they broke a rib, or mainly to explain where things are, where your lungs are, where the heart is, stuff like that.
Well, that's an interesting piece.
Yeah.
That's an interesting piece.
Of course, anymore they're all made out of plastic.
Right. That happens to be a real bone skeleton.
That's a real one there.
That's a real skeleton. Well, Dr. Caldwell, we're going to come back and spend a little more time with you on frontier and pioneer medicine. In the meantime, I sure thank you for all this.
Well, sure thank you.
See you next time. Good luck with your patients.
You bet. You have a good day.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. As we left the town doctor's office, I had a better understanding and deeper respect for frontier medicine. Doc Caldwell in real life is Dr. Kenneth Caldwell, M.D., a former family practitioner over 20 years and was among the last of a dying breed of doctors to make rural house calls in all types of weather and is an expert in folk and frontier medicine. He is now on the medical staff at University of Northern Iowa and will be visiting more with Dr. Caldwell for an in-depth look at folk and frontier medicine very soon.
When I was growing up, I learned.
Hi, Art.
Hi there.
You got your corncob pipe going.
You betcha. That's the most American thing that was ever made. Now, nobody knows who invented the corncob pipe. Very likely the Indians did. But we know that in 1869, down at Worcester, Missouri, Henry Tibby, who was a Holland immigrant, actually was a woodworker. One day he made a pipe out of a corncob, stuck a reed stem into it, gave it to a friend, started to get it popular. Henry Tibby started a corncob pipe factory. That factory still operates today. It's known as Missouri Mercier. They ship corncob pipes all over the world. Well, in 1869 and for many years after, there was no trouble on corncobs. Farmers planted open pollinated corn. Man would shell a load of corn out here in the country, bring a load of cobs in. Well, they didn't all work, but they had plenty. But by the 1930s, the farmers are switching to hybrid. Well, look what we've done. We've shrunk that cob. Take that extra energy and produce more grain. This is smart. This is beautiful. But the Missouri Pipe Company seen they were in trouble. These things aren't big enough to make pipes. We don't get ahead of Missourians. 1940, Missouri State University went to work on it. By 1946, Dr. Mark Zuber, well known for corn genetics, had produced a new hybrid, Missouri Pipe number 14. Now, the average cob will make 2 average pipes and 1 small one. And when they get a hold of a cob this big, they'll make a pipe out of it. It's not too usual. Now, the grain on this is flinty and hard. There's really no market for it at all. Basically, it's ground up right on the farm and fed to the livestock. It's too hard to make post toasties or anything else. So, you go down around Worcester, Missouri, you'll see a number of acres of Missouri Pipe number 14 in cultivation. They're after the cobs. They're not after the corn. That's the whole story.
What a switch that is.
Yeah.
We had 2 kinds of women in this time period. We had the woman with money and the woman without money. And we didn't have anything in between. This was the Panic of 1873. Lasted 5 years. People began to pull out of the latter part of the 70s. But until then, everybody was very poor. And the lady that went through our store, she couldn't afford a sewing machine, even though there were machines in Des Moines. She had to do all of her sewing by hand. But the lady who lived in the fancy house on the hill up there, she could have a sewing machine in her home. She could have a seamstress come out, spend a couple of weeks with her, and make her the latest fashions out of Paris. So there was that extreme difference. Another difference would show up in hats, the 2 hats that we have here. If a lady had a little bit of money, she could come in and buy a hat like this. And if it was a shell of a hat. And if she wanted to look like the lady on the hill, she could come in and buy some feathers off of us and decorate the hat. Or she could even buy some dried flowers. A lot of dried flowers were used on the clothing and on the hats back there then. But now this little lady right here, she didn't have as much money as that lady even. And so she made her entire hat. She came in, she bought the velvet off of us, she bought the dried flowers, the lace, all of this, and made her own little hat. And that was the extreme difference between the people. Now, this little dress right here is 1850, about 20 years earlier than this. Amelia Bloomer and the women's rights ladies designed this dress, trying to tell women they didn't have to wear so many clothes. This is called the Bloomer dress for Amelia Bloomer. And we found in the 1870s, women were still wearing this to the rallies. When the women went to hold a big rally on women's rights, they would still wear the Bloomer dress. And the bloomers go to the waist. So their advertisement for this was, you don't have to wear 3 to 4 slips with this. You don't have to have a side saddle to ride a horse, and your dress won't drag in the mud. And they had a lot of good reasons, but because women would not wear men's trousers and were totally against wearing men's trousers, this did not become popular with anyone. We did find out a few farm ladies wore it on the farm, but they wouldn't have wore it out in public for anything. Now, if we're talking about the lady who had a little bit of money, this bustle right here would cost 65 cents. That eggs were a nickel a dozen. So for the lady going through our store, that would have been 13 dozen eggs, and she couldn't afford it. A lot of them couldn't afford this. So a dress-up dress for the common lady was a calico dress, a dress made out of calico with maybe 3 slips, and that would be it. But the lady who had the money would have all of this on. She'd have the hoop skirt to hold her dress out, the bustle to give her a hump in the back, which was just style, and didn't have to do with anything else but style. She would have the corset to hold her waist in and make her as tiny as she could be, because that was very, very important to them. She'd have several slips on, 2 pair of drawers, long hose, button shoes, and her dress over all of that, even if it was 100-degree temperature. So that was extreme, extreme difference in them. We even had a little machine here. If you were sewing and doing your own sewing, you could come in and you could get, we had little shells of buttons, and you could buy material, and we could cover your buttons with the same material you were making your dress in. And one thing that helped them, one thing that did give them a stylish dress, was patterns. Butterick came out with her pattern in 1867. And you could buy a pattern and make a corset, or you could buy a pattern and make a bustle. And we found out that usually they would find a way. A pattern was 15 cents ordinarily. That's 3 dozen eggs. So they would find a way to get one pattern. We found that in a lot of the homes there was one pattern for one stylish dress, and that's all they had. So extreme difference.
In the weeks to come, we will step back in time at Living History Farms, Des Moines, Iowa, and chat with the general storekeepers and the town doctor, and witness the evolution of farm life from pioneer times to the present. We will venture to the Old West, where the series will take you to abandoned gold mines and try our hand at panning for the elusive metal which drove so many to despair. We will visit the most significant military sites along the famous Oregon Trail for a glimpse of the everyday life of the people stationed there and the exploits of pioneers passing by on their way west. We will take you behind the bars of the frontier prisons to discover their role in the taming of the West and spend several enjoyable hours with our old friend Bill Cody for a personal glimpse of his world-famous grandfather, Colonel William F. Buffalo Bill Cody. Other episodes include a look at frontier entertainment featuring a performance at the restored Atlas Theater in Cheyenne, Wyoming, a visit to the Wind River Reservation for a look at the blending of Native American culture and European religion at their Episcopal mission, and a talk with mountain men for an inside view of the Rocky Mountain fur trade and its influence on the exploration of the West. We thank you for allowing us to introduce our series, and we invite you to watch as we bring the living history of Americana on tour into the homes of America. Thanks for watching us, folks. The success of our program depends on you, the home viewer. If you have comments or questions about our program, please write me in care of Americana on Tour, Congerville, Illinois, 61729. We'll see you next week. That's Americana on Tour, Congerville, Illinois, 61729.
Well, these little old general stores out in the country wouldn't have many things for children, but there are some surprises because kids might come in today and only have a penny to spend. Didn't want to spend it on candy, they wanted to take something home to play with. Well, little girls could have bought dollies like that for a penny. That's what they call a penny doll. They can be a little longer and they can be shorter. Now, you couldn't do much with that except to wrap a rag around it and call it a blanket baby. But nevertheless, they could buy a doll for a penny. Boys could have bought toy cap pistols for a penny. There were 7 models made in the 1870s that sold for a penny. The little bigger ones sold for a nickel. But the children might have come to town today and got something free. Now, by the 1860s, there were 3 companies in America making paper dolls. And then they found out what a neat way to advertise. This one advertises Ponzi's powder. But everybody got in this: coffee, flour, sugar, tea, shoes. So a little girl might have come in today and got a free paper doll. Now, boys didn't want paper dolls. They didn't give a hoot if they were free. So they gave boys something to make a noise with. They gave them wooden whistles. And with advertising on them. Designed to drive mothers up a wall with, see? And here was another little old giveaway. This one advertised stoves. This would be given to both boys and girls. You can see why that's still around. Some mother hid that after about 2 stormy days. Now another, it seemed like they always made something for boys to make a noise with and get in trouble. Now they made a thing they called a cap cane. And we're going to put a cap in it and hope it works. We'll just get it around here like that. Now you can see why this one was still around. Some mother hid that too. Probably some boy fired that behind his sister. She jumped into something and went and told mother, and mother hid it. Because that was found in an attic down in southern Iowa. Now this is a doll that originally came to us from England, called the penny wooden. Didn't sell for a penny in our country, but it did sell for their English penny, which was a heck of a lot bigger. There's what the English penny looked like. It was worth more than our penny. This doesn't look too bad when you get clothes on it. But now a lot of times, a little store like ours wouldn't handle a doll like that. Gee whiz, that thing was 35 cents. That was 7 dozen eggs. So the people couldn't afford it. But they would have doll heads. They'd start out maybe with a nickel one, and a dime one, and a 15-center, and kind of work their way up from there. So a little girl would pick out a doll head, and then mother or grandmother would make the body for it. And this was still going on in the early 1900s, we found out. Now there's another little old game here that children play a lot today. Well, they've been playing it for 2,000 years, and that's jacks. Now the children didn't have jacks and balls 2,000 years ago. They used stones. Put some little stones out here, put a stone in their hand or a pebble, throw it in the air, and while they was catching it, grab up the other pebbles. The colonial children was playing games with stones they called 5 stones or jack stones. Now by the 1830s, there was items on the market like that they called jacks, but they didn't have rubber balls yet. So they used a wooden ball. Of course, by our time period, probably by 1850s, they had rubber balls. In fact, boys could buy a nice little rubber ball here. Might have cost a nickel. We're not too sure on it. But they could bought a rubber ball. Now blocks like this started coming out in the 1870s with numbers and letters on them. Before that, they had just plain blocks, which was fun to build with, but they considered this educational because it had the alphabet, had the numbers on it. Some of the other items around here too, tops, my golly, tops can be traced back to the times of the Greeks. But of course, a lot of people would make their own tops. Marbles can be traced back to the Roman times. A boy could come in and buy probably a handful of marbles for a nickel if he had that much. Most of the marbles in this time period were clay, but they had better marbles out than that. And that would just about wrap it up for what they would be dominoes. But of course, that was a family game. There would be checkers, but this would be about all you'd find in the old general store. Now, we have been able to study a lot of ledgers, and we find that around Christmas, you don't see much evidence of gift buying. They're buying food. They're going to have a good dinner, but you see practically no evidence of gift buying. But this would be, if a store had everything we've got in here, they would consider this a pretty darn nice store for children out in the country.